The banking sector's profits rose by another 8% in the first quarter of 2022. But are the banks really immune to economic headwinds? KPMG banking partner John Kensington joins me to discuss. So, John, another 8%. I think we were saying this time a quarter ago that, things might slow down in this first 3 months of 2022, but it doesn't seem like it's happened.
No, it doesn't. And there's probably a couple of reasons for it. The first would be that the banks have enjoyed loan growth for around 1.25%, and they've maintained their margins. So they've got a bigger business on which they're making margins. So that has helped their result. But I think probably while that's been a reasonably large impact, what hasn't happened yet is that the headwinds we talk about, things like inflation, rising interest rates, falling house prices, the general cost of living increases, and a lack of confidence hadn't really impacted them in this quarter. Perhaps the first signs were starting to, but it hadn't really impacted the banks in this quarter.
One thing we have seen, of course, though, is the first impairment expense being posted since September 2020. Is that a sign of things to come?
Actually, that could be seen as a very important indicator. So since 2020 through to now, the banks have said, well, we made loan provisions. They might have been a bit much. We think we can release them. And now for the first time, they're starting to look ahead because these are forward-looking models and say, oh, actually, we do need some more provisioning. And that'll be based around them being perhaps a little concerned about what is being forecast to potentially happen economically.
Right, so that's people getting into trouble on their mortgages and so forth because of the cost of living?
It's a pay packet that at the moment is under pressure from higher interest rates, a higher cost of living, perhaps some people having borrowed at a rate that now when it resets or gets changed by the bank will be higher. Yes, all those sorts of things, yeah.
Interest rates going up, of course. I mean, does it stand to reason that they earn more money on the back of rising interest rates?
They potentially can if they put the increase in rates through on loans ahead of them having to pay more to source the money, then potentially they can. But also too, look, I think if an interest rate is 2% that the bank is borrowing at, and they're lending to you at 4, that's a margin of 2. If they're having to borrow at 8 or 10, they can probably get a little more margin in there and lend to you. Let's say they're borrowing at 8 at maybe 10 and a bit. So yeah.
But on the flip side, they've got to keep their operating expenses down, and they do seem to be doing that quite effectively at the moment, don't they?
Yeah, I think also too, that's important to remember because in this March quarter that we're looking at, not everything had opened up again. So there would have still been some restrictions around travel, presumably, possibly some around entertainment. And the banks will have been looking very hard, as all businesses have actually, at what expenditure they can still suppress slightly.
8% rise in profits again. I think last time we said it was a record, so it's up even more. Do you think that sort of level of profit increase can continue this year?
If I'm really honest, if I say no, it will. If I say yes, it won't. But I think if you ask me to make an educated guess, I think there are probably some headwinds now for the general economy, whether it's the supply chain, rising costs, rising interest rates, falling confidence, that means that it's unlikely that those profits will increase over the next 2 quarters.
One thing, though, that always amazes me is the percentage of their books that is in the mortgage business. It's up again, I think, to over 64%. It just seems to keep rising. Do you think we will continue to see that?
Look, I think we will. I think there's a couple of things there. As New Zealanders have a love affair with property, we all think we can do a little bit of DIY. So we buy a property, we do it up, we sell it. But I think until property is treated exactly the same as all other classes of assets in terms of taxation, there will be a group of people that, because they have historically or their parents have historically, will tend to focus on property. Because I think the flip side of this is while there's a lot of lending to property in New Zealand comparatively, we don't have an established share market and we don't have as big a range of investments. So, look, I think because of those factors, it probably will still be the core of the balance sheet. And look, after all, New Zealand is a relatively young country. It doesn't have large pools of wealth. And so the banks are doing, a job to allow people to borrow and build a future.
John Kensington of KPMG. We'll look forward to checking in again next quarter and see if these profits have risen again.
Thanks, Maria.